Hello there. Can you hear me?
Hello? Yes, I can hear you.
All right. So basically, what I'll do is I'll take an interview for around 45 minutes and I'll keep the last 10-15 minutes for feedback. I can choose to focus on any angle that you feel you need practice on. So for Facebook, if you want me to take a product sense style interview or an execution style interview, it's totally up to you. Since everything is happening over audio, what I'd recommend is if you ever need to pause to think about stuff, by all means, feel free to do so, but try to verbalize your thoughts so that I can keep track of where we are. And that's mostly it.
Yeah, sounds great. I would be interested in doing product sense.
All right, we'll do product sense in that case. I might ask a question that you've either prepared for or encountered before. This seems to happen with a lot of candidates. If that happens, just let me know and I'll change my question. Right?
Yeah, sounds great.
All right. So let's say you're a PM who's recently joined Facebook and you've been asked to think about how you'd go about designing a newsfeed 2.0. We've kept the current format, we've had it for years, it's been pretty successful, but we want to try something fresh. How would you go about thinking about this?
So before I start thinking through this problem space, I have some clarifying questions. So first one is, are there any specific problem space that we are going after, or there is any specific goal?
Let's say for now it's pretty open. We want to conceptually try out something new because we think a fresh perspective might drive a better user experience or ultimately more engagement for our customers, but we aren't quite sure. So the overarching goal will always be to offer the best possible experience.
Sounds great. My next question is about, are there any specific market we are going after, or that's something up to me to go come up with one?
That's entirely up to you. So if you'd like to make it generic, that's fine. If you want to choose a particular target segment, that's also fine. I'd like your perspective on what you think makes sense.
Sounds great. And are there any constraints that I should be aware of?
So let's say we want to roll something out in the space of 6 months to 1 year, and you have a full engineering team. So there's no constraints on that front.
Great. And my last question is, I know we are talking about Newsfeed 2.0. My assumption is we're still considering this experience within Facebook, or like we can think also beyond that from a fresh set of eyes.
So for now, let's consider the scope within Facebook. So anything you come up with would potentially be replacing the current newsfeed experience we've got.
Got it. Thank you very much. Thanks for clarifying my questions. So as next steps, thinking about the following. I'll try to set up some foundation for this problem space, and I'll think through that and kind of like look for whether it aligns with Facebook's mission and vision and what something exists today, and like looking at the landscape. And then I'll think through the user segments and pain points. And after going through that, I'll come up with an MVP goal. And once I have a goal, I will kind of come up with a set of solutions and prioritize one. And then if time permits and as you feel correct, I can go through like deep dive into the features and then talk about some of the launching activities.
Sounds good. Very comprehensive indeed. Let's go for it.
So in order to set some context and foundation, well, I'll start with Facebook's mission. Facebook's mission is to enable people, platform and tools so that they can build communities and stay more connected, like bringing the world a lot more closer. And also people can share and express their ideas as they feel or which matters to them. So based on that, I think Newsfeed is rightly positioned in Facebook's strategy and vision. I definitely see a huge role to play in terms of Facebook's success so far. And it's a great platform where people are sharing and expressing their ideas and also learning about what's happening in their network.
Yep.
So given where Facebook stands today, I think in terms of its brand, outreach, it's a global company, I think, and it has a social graph. There are a lot of strengths I can see. And I guess like Newsfeed has a key role to play because it's first thing every user that lands into like Facebook sees that first. And from user standpoint, I think there are two sides of the user space I can see. One who are like creating content and the other users who are like looking at the content. So you can see like from user standpoint, there's a lot of interactions going on and they get a lot of tons of values. Another big set of users who are getting benefited from this besides this major groups are advertisers. So I think advertisers are also making a way in the newsfeed and like trying to bring revenue for Facebook. So looking at where Facebook stands and the users are there engaged, I think to begin with, I'll set some overarching goal. And then as I think through the user segment and pain points and narrow it down, I will come up with a more specific goal. Do you have any questions so far?
No, all good so far.
So based on that, I think Facebook's strategy and where newsfeed stands today in the heavy engagement we see, I think what is important for Facebook is from user standpoint, we need to keep the newsfeed more engaged and interesting for users so that the stickiness on the product continues to be there. And we can continue to add value to our user base and make it easy and valuable for them. And from business standpoint, like when I look at Facebook's goal, definitely next couple of years, we want to focus on driving engagement. Of course, like look for more monetization avenues, but that won't be something like number one. Our first criteria is to kind of drive engagement.
Okay.
Do you have any follow-up questions, or I can start thinking through user segment pain points and then I would come up with a more precise and specific goal?
No, I think that makes sense. Let's talk about the user segments and narrow down on the goal.
The way I was thinking to kind of divide the user segment is to start with like two big Since we are talking about like kind of redesigning the Newsfeed 2.0, based on that and the goal, the overarching goal, based on that I was thinking that, and then motivation, I was thinking the user segment in two buckets. One is who are the power users of Newsfeed, and they're like, when I say power users, they are using Newsfeed almost day in out, and there are novice users like who are kind of like learning about it first time, or they're kind of like rarely not like using the feed so often. So based on like as I tie back to the overarching goal and kind of like our redesign experience plus Facebook strength and everything combining, I feel like I would like to focus more on the power users.
All right.
Novice user is like impact and reach wise. I'm applying that framework to prioritize between the two segments. So I would kind of like deprioritize for now.
So before we go into which one we prioritize, can you tell me a little bit about why you chose this method of segmentation? Why is usage pattern the most relevant way to segment this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would at a broad level, why I picked this segment, I can say, and further I was thinking through going even more deeper. So first of all, the analogy I'm trying to use is the reach, right? The impact, because we are trying to, there's an existing newsfeed base, which is like used by a lot of users on the platform, and Facebook's engagement shows like some strong insights, like there are about billions of users, daily active or monthly active users on the platform. So one, we are redesigning. So we want to like look at the reach and impact. So any changes that we are doing, we had to keep the larger group who are using this and day in out, the newsfeed, and then sort of prioritize their needs so that any change we will do, the impact would be huge for these. Any change in terms of like making these users' life a lot more easier and make them more engaging on the platform, it will improve. And also on the downside, if something goes wrong with the new experience, we are not risking a lot.
All right. If I could challenge you to just think about other ways you could also segment the user base, how would you approach that exercise?
Yeah, so other ways I can think about sort of like what life cycle stage the users are and how I can segment. What I meant by that, by age group, and then sort of look at I can also look at the usage pattern based on the age group, like which are the age group mostly engaged with Facebook. And as per my knowledge, at least I know that like millennials and up to like age 40 are the majority of folks on Facebook. Of course, there are other age group spans, but I think these are the core group like who use the platform more often.
All right, fair enough. I'm just trying to get a little bit more ideas out of you right now. We've got segmentation by usage frequency, we've got segmentation by age group. What are some of the other ways we could potentially slice or dice Facebook's user base?
Another one I can think about the motivation.
All right. What do you mean by this?
So why somebody would come to Facebook looking for newsfeed? So I might be interested in like different types of content, and also like mainly Facebook is connecting people with their friends and family. And if I'm a person, I'm more interested in learning about what's happening in my friends and family group or within my network. And if I have a strong appetite for looking out what's happening in the space. And so that's my main motivation, which is driving me to come to Facebook app every day and kind of read through the newsfeed, because newsfeed is the place which kind of consolidates what's happening in the network, and I get all the information in one place.
All right. Fair enough. Fine. Cool. Thanks for sharing that. Let's go back to the segmentation you'd picked, which was based on the frequency of usage, power users versus novice users, and you'd prioritize power users. Now that you've isolated those, what would you do next?
Yeah, so in power users, I would like to deep dive a little more to find a narrow, like specific use case so that I can think about their pain points. So in power users, I can think about like couple of buckets in terms of professional and non-professional users. When I say that, why I'm dividing that, because I'm also adding a little bit of competitive angle to this, like what's out there already, and like how Facebook can have like still continue to have a market, unique market value fit. So why I thought like professional and non-professional could be one good one, because professional who are professionals, they are more interested in learning about what's happening in their professional network. And there are different means today people get content from, and obviously they can come to Facebook, but motivation wise Facebook may be slightly different for them. So I would like to focus more on the non-professional, and it is more in terms of motivation than like individual. But people are coming to Facebook sort of not geared towards professional content, but non-professional content primarily.
All right, non-professional it is.
Yeah, and then since I'm talking about like more usage frequency, that I will keep in mind. And then my goal will be like overarching goal will be like how I can make this user still like very much glued to the platform and getting value from the platform. So to recap, like the user segment that I am going to focus on are the power users who are interested in looking at non-professional content primarily.
Right, that's still a pretty wide base of users to target. What do you think you'd design that would be new for them?
I mean, your question is like what solutions I can think about. That's what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, before I do so, I would like to think about some of their pain points and prioritize, and then come up with a goal and then solution.
All right, fair enough. Yes, let's do that.
So these are the users who are power users, and of course like more interested in non-professional content, and their pain points are like there are too much information available on the platform, so they are kind of like lost at times. Second is whatever information they see, how they can trust that information. The third I can think about, since these are like sort of power users, is a lot of sentiments happens when you read the news. And sometimes like there could be like inflammatory contents or hateful contents, and not exactly like violating the community guidelines per se, but maybe it is somehow like impacting their sentiment or sort of mental health if they're reading that information. I can think that could be also one of the possibility that could happen, and maybe they're beginning the day with a newsfeed driving their sentiment or mood for the day. So that is one of the pain point I can think about. And there are several others definitely there in terms of like if I am looking at the relevant information on my newsfeed. For example, if I do not log in for like 2 days, then the fear of missing out is there because there's tons of feeds that is coming up and I might be losing the context on the feed.
Yeah.
So among these, if I had to prioritize one of the pain points, again,
A quick question though, before we prioritize, we picked a user base which was primarily, we decided to prioritize primarily on non-professional power users. Out of all the pain points that you've outlined though, which of these do you think are unique to this particular segment when compared to, say, professional power users or, say, non-professional novice users?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think all these are applied to all of these users. Primarily, I would think about this way, like the magnitude of the problem could be higher for non-professional content. When I
All
talk
right.
about trust, professional content are backed up by some of the professional content providers. So trust is like kind of somewhat taken care, so the magnitude of the problem is lesser. And
All
too
right.
much of information lost. When I say that, what I meant by that, like for non-professional content, there could be like several types of information available, may not be super organized. Whereas professional, like if it is like some particular category, there is at least categorization and stuff like that in like available, which is more structured, and maybe the users are not feeling as lost with the information overload.
All right. Fair enough.
Similarly, the other ones also, the magnitude of the problem I see more
Mhm.
as compared to other user segments.
All right. Fair enough. Let's move ahead. So you wanted to pick one particular problem that you think has the biggest gap.
That's right. I think I would pick up like mainly the mental health or the sentiment part of the problem. The reason why I'm picking up that again, so too much of information of like and lost sort of, that is an easier problem to sort of solve, and users can also have some best practices and have the information organized in certain ways, or like they have little bit control on that. Trust is another big area we can definitely help, but it's a hard problem to solve in terms of like there are tons of things going on, and I'm sure like we can think about how we can improve our trust score on the newsfeed, and that may be existing today, and we are thinking about like what's new for the next. So something on the sentiment or mental health of the side, we haven't done a lot of work, and that could be a great area to focus on.
All right. So that's one particular angle, which is that of impact. What are some of the other things that might inform your judgment on which of these topics to pick?
Yeah, the other one is about, is this a problem that users would like to take help from sort of another service like Facebook? That's one thing that I would think about. Like, and then the other one I can think about is reach also. If this is a common problem that many users face, and then thinking about the future, how it's going towards. And another thing is like why I brought that up, thinking about the future, because majority of these power users are like sort of millennials given like Facebook usage pattern. And based on that, like we hear a lot of mental health issues these days with information overload and digitalization. So that is another fact that is turning out to be a biggest pain point, and a lot of work being done. And news is one of the areas that causing a lot of those challenges, introducing a lot of challenges in the users. So that is one of the reason also, like thinking about future trends.
All right. Fair enough. I'm convinced we're going to target the mental health angle.
Yeah.
How are you going to go about solving this?
Yeah, so to recap, I really want to quickly come up with a one-line MVP goal, and then I will go through the solution. So give me a few seconds, I'll write down the MVP goal to recap.
Sure, go for it.
Okay, the MVP goal I'm thinking about is help power users who are interested in non-professional content with an improved newsfeed experience, so that the information overload, the mental overload won't be as hard, and it will be more engaging for them.
All right. Fair enough.
Do you have any follow-up questions on the MVP goal, or should I?
No, I think we can stick to this. So we're going to concentrate more on the mental overload angle, not the information overload. All right.
Yeah, that's correct.
All right. Cool.
Okay. At a high level, like I can think about three solutions and I'll apply a prioritization framework based on the like sort of impact and effort and then go pick one. So the three solutions that I'm thinking are based on my MVP goal, tying it back to that. So the revamped news feed on the Facebook like experience, how I can enhance that. The same way experience. I mean, you land on Facebook, log in and then land on the news feed experience. It will continue to be there, but just that the news feed information will be a little more organized and done in a different way than it's being shown today, like which is a list of things that are scrolling through like a page. So I can talk through that more later, but this is high level. I'm thinking about one solution.
Got it. All right.
Solution two is more of using augmented reality. So to sort of make the experience more nicer in terms of, as my goal is to lighter on the mental overload. So I've seen like people are good at receiving objects or looking at this thing, then like long form posts. So how like using augmented reality, I can deliver some of this information at ease to the user. So that's another thinking I have. The third solution I'm thinking about, sort of more of voice enabled newsfeed. What I meant by that is when a user lands on newsfeed, they have an option to, instead of like reading through the newsfeed, they can like say play my newsfeed and it'll go like a voice enabled readout of the newsfeed.
All right.
So among these three, the way I'm thinking of like prioritizing, as I said before, is more on the impact and the effort and also how close to the goal in Facebook's mission. Like first I'll take up AR. AR is like an evolving technology. We're not like quite yet there to bring in AR experience. Something to be considered for future, not for immediate. So I would not go with that solution. The voice enabled one is interesting and it would sort of help users easing out the mental overload. However, there could be other accessibility challenges, like what if the user is deaf and dumb, like how would we address that? And also thinking about other sources of information or like other products which are in the market already, like Echo or Google Assistant, they might be doing similar thing. Then why like users would be using some of like a feature like this? So I would rule out this. So that leaves me with the newsfeed landing page, like how I can revamp and make it less mental overload. And why I chose this, cost wise also it won't be as expensive and it'll be easy, something to experiment and bring out this new change.
All right. Let's explore this one in a little more depth then. What are some of the things you would change?
Sure. So what the way I'm thinking, I'll quickly jot down some of the MVP features, and I can talk through that. And if you're interested in time permits, I can go beyond MVP. Otherwise, I can talk about the launch activities.
All right.
So one thing I would like to call out, like while I'm not thinking through the MVP features, so I made actually one assumption which I didn't probably call out specifically, where I was just focused on the power users who are consuming the newsfeed rather than the content creators for this problem space. And since my goal is more about reducing the mental overload, so for now I'm not as much focused on the content creator. So basically, content creator, the experience would not change much.
All right, fair enough.
Okay. The way I'm thinking about the MVP feature is, first of all, like when user logs in, and Facebook already has a lot of data, and today it does also a lot of AI. So understanding the user persona well in terms of the intent, behavior, interests, and how frequently, like looking at the usage pattern, also what they enjoyed looking at in the newsfeed more. Based on that, Facebook will sort of automatically, when they land on the top section, Facebook will automatically categorize the information. For example, say I'm a person who's interested more reading through a set of friend circle, like information from there, or I'm a person more like interested in looking at certain groups, following that very deliberately. Any post from that groups is what matters to me. Rest of the updates do not matter to me as much. And likewise, so I can like understand that, use the AI, and then sort of come with that automated categories on the top trail. It'll be a trail of cards, which will show based on the usage pattern, interest, and all. So that when user clicks on that, the related news feeds will be shown to the user.
All right.
Besides, like the user can also have a lot more flexibility and control over what they are able to see, in terms of, say, they can give a feedback or input saying that whether they're open to see like sort of inflammatory content, and that would kind of like understand the sentiment of the user, like if the user is okay to take like, or interested in rather like those content. And some users might be thinking to like think about like more of lighter content and more engaging content. So that feedback loop we can introduce in the newsfeed experience on the top section, where user will have an ability to do that. And using this, like we can say like show only that much content that is needed for the user. And also, as I was talking about fear, if beyond MVP, we can think about much more features. But to start with, like MVP, I would focus on this. Beyond MVP, I can always focus on like the other pain points that I was listing out, like fear of missing out some of the news feed, which if I'm not logging for a day or two, I can think about like same experience feedback loop. I can plan to enhance that to enable other aspects as well.
Yes, so thanks for articulating that minimum step we take. If you had to articulate for your team what an ideal end product looks like, say 1 year or 2 years down the line, how would you describe that?
For the team, it will be sort of a revamped newsfeed experience that will help the power users who are primarily interested in the non-professional content, how sort of make their lives a lot more easier and less like mentally overloaded, so that we can promote more mental health prevention measures.
All right, fair enough. And before you start building this out, what are some of the things you'd safeguard against? Like, what do you think would go wrong?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of things. First of all, like since the experience is totally changing, I mean, of course, not to a great extent, but there are some categories and feedback loop and all. So we'll have to look at if user behavior wise, are we going to risk, like we will result in some of the risk. Another thing I can think about, since we are like trying to understand the usage pattern and using data, we are coming up with these recommendations. If there is any data quality related challenges, we will see in the recommendation that may not meet users' need. And third is like whether it's really helping with their mental health and helping with their like overall like less load on their mental state. So those are some of the things, like how we will validate that part it's working out, because there is no single metric would tell us that clearly. So those are some of the risks I can think about. Obviously, there are mitigation plans around it, like recommendation. There's definitely more experimentation and iteration approach we can take, and then maybe enable with small group of users and then try out and look at our metrics. Metrics are not impacted, and then we can go from there.
I'd like to understand this a little bit more, to dig a little bit deeper into.
Sure.
The first of these was, you said there might be some kind of risk on the user behavior front. And the third risk you mentioned was we won't know if we're really helping with the mental health challenge that we've taken up. So for the first one, user behavior, how would you try to measure if there's any kind of risk here, and like what are the metrics you'd look at?
Sure. Since my goal for this exercise is more about driving engagement, so overall, like I would look at the engagement metrics, and what I meant by that is engagement is the DAU or the MAU, daily active user and monthly active user. And when I say active, your active definition is they are at least logging into the experience couple of times a day or a month or week, and then taking some actions on the feeds, like either they're engaging with the feed, looking at for a given period of time, or clicking or liking or like interacting with the feed.
All right.
So that metrics I will look at in terms of measuring success, and see overall like that metrics is not going down. Besides, in terms of guardrail metric, I can always look at guardrail metrics. And if there are users who were actively engaged before and they're no longer like logging into the app or like churning or like leaving Facebook and going somewhere else. So those are some of the things, and I can actually look into more deeper, like if I can set some thresholds on those metrics and do some kind of cohort analysis that will help me to guardrail the experience.
All right, good stuff. So let's take a theoretical scenario where you've rolled this interface out. At the top, there are some categories saying friends, cat videos, say news updates, stuff like this. And we're seeing your target user group actually clicking on these and interacting with these. All right. But a direct impact of this is that they see less content and therefore spend less time on the site. How are you going to respond to this?
Yeah, that's a great call out. In fact, like that did come to my mind. But then tying it back to the goal here, like when we are releasing this experience, and I think you also asked me, like, how are we going to measure success with mental health overload? So I guess my target users will be in that case, like when I'm releasing this experience first time, to sort of reach out to the users who are experiencing the mental overload looking at the information. But then to address your concern, like what if users are less engaged now? So there's obviously a toggle experience would like to give where people can toggle between the detailed view versus the lighter view, and that would sort of address. My approach in that case would be like default. The lighter view experience could be with the users who are more interested in like not seeing too much of content and they like this experience, and the other one, and we can also always enable and give more control to the users. They can also set like which would be their default behavior.
Got it. Thank you for sharing that. And in terms of the big goal, like let's say we want to improve the mental health experience of the people, how would you end up measuring this?
I guess there are a couple of ways I was thinking. One is like, obviously there's no straightforward way. So I had to look at like the user reviews or user surveys, and then NPS as qualitative research qualitative metrics analysis is one way to go for. The other one I was thinking about is like if there is a certain group of users that started using it more, and then looking at why others started using it more and understanding the usage pattern or user in general, like user persona, and if I can infer from the signals, like if they're connected with like some of the health professionals. I mean, again, there's a privacy component to this, how I can inference this information, but that's something I can think for more futuristic time.
All right, cool. Thank you so much for taking out. I think we'll pause the interview at this stage. Typically, like some experts or some interviewers would have gone down the route of summarizing, exploring the MVP in a little more depth, maybe asking you to build a mock-up, maybe talking a little bit more about how you'd actually execute on this first step, what that might mean in terms of team interactions and all. But then those are much more product execution domain as well. So I think from the sense perspective, we've covered a lot of ground. What I think I'll do is give you some high level feedback and then go section by section on what I thought you did really well and where I saw some potential room for improvement. Does that sound all right?
Sounds great.
All right, cool. So at a very high level, I thought, hang on, let me just scroll up to my notes. Yes. So at a high level, I thought you did a good job of narrowing down a really open-ended problem. A lot of candidates tend to freak out when the scope is something so core to Facebook's experience or so broad without a clear goal in sight. And this often happens around really core deep products for companies, like how would you improve Google search, or how would you improve maps, or in this case, newsfeed. So well done dealing with that. I thought you took it like a pro. I also thought you had a really good structure that you flagged out up front. And I love the fact that you continuously checked in with me with regards to, are we on track? Is there any follow-up you might have to align with making sure that I'm also getting an opportunity to evaluate you on the stuff I consider important. So definitely keep this up. Because typically in Facebook, different interviewers will have different goals, and they might have, like, I don't know what stage you're at, but if you're at the on-site stage, they would have received feedback from your first round and made a list of things that they would want to cover. It's really important to give them that room to drill down into those angles. Like, it might be prioritization, it might be personas, it might be MVPs, and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
So at a high level, that was the good stuff. The stuff that I, again, at a high level, thought where you might have some potential room for improvement was in your choice of fleshing out personas and segmenting users. And I'll explain in a bit more depth what you could do slightly better there. And secondly, in your justification for which angle you have chosen to prioritize. I didn't think any of these things were deal breakers, to be perfectly honest. I just thought they could have been done better, but I thought you also did them pretty adequately. So I want to call out that this is much more constructive than it is like, hey, you did a bad job here. Because all in all, I didn't think you did a bad job in any of the sections. All right.
Yep, great. And I'm actually self-aware also. Sort of the segmentation area is one of my improvement area.
All right. All right. Fair enough. Then that's something you could potentially try practicing on. And then I'll spend a little more time over there and we can maybe brainstorm some additional angles to look at. So start from the top. After the question, you had like good clarifications. You asked them very quickly and efficiently. You also gave me scope to say, hey, no, I want you to pick here. So that was well done. Like I mentioned, you had a good structure that you then articulated, which made it easy for me to track the whole session. I also thought you did a good job of tying in how core the newsfeed is, and you said some crucial things there, which also gave you an opportunity to tie this back to, like, in the solution stage. You didn't do this, but this is again constructive. So, for instance, you flagged out that this is the first experience. It's the first thing people see when they end up logging into Facebook, or signing up, or just coming back to the interface, which could also then tie into this whole angle of mental overload or too much information or some of the other goals or problems you articulated, in that first experience is going to define how many users stick around, what the retention is going to be. Unlike all the other ancillary products, it is very, very core to Facebook's mission. The next part then was segmentation. So I thought here, there's some stuff you did really well, which some candidates miss out on. So what you did well is that you identified that this is a double-sided, not marketplace, but say an interface which has both consumers as well as creators. I did think that further down the interview, you kind of missed the nuance here, although you brought it up and mentioned that, hey, I'm going to choose to, I've made an assumption that I'm choosing to focus more on the consumers. That was implicit in your choice and your priorities, but it's good to make it explicit, especially since you've already done the great work of flagging these segments out upfront. All right. The second good thing you did, I thought, is identify one very key stakeholder, which is the advertisers. Again, something people drop the ball on because ultimately they are who pay for the company and pay for the business. So they are very often, it's perfectly fine to turn the interview in the direction, if your interviewer permits, into the direction of talking about how a new newsfeed experience, which allows less intrusive but more effective ad formats, could be a perfectly legitimate ground. So good job on flagging out the key interactors with this experience. I thought the goal was decently done. You wanted to ensure that it remained interesting, but then we moved into user segments. And at this point, I thought you, initially I was concerned that you basically jumped at the first idea that you had, which was power versus novice, which is why I pushed a little bit to see, all right, is this a choice of segmentation you've made, or is it just the first idea you have? And the reason I did that is because usually when you segment users, then this should play a key role in your prioritization and in your problem solving as well. And this is why I kept bringing back to the fact that, like, some of the solutions you built and some of the problems you identified, they were extremely relevant to your target segment, but they were also relevant to folks outside your target segment, which then made me question, all right, why did we restrict our scope to just say non-professionals or just say powered users? And I think you did try to explain this. That's why I challenged you on this as well. But my advice would be, it's totally okay to, for example, since you're clearly thought about it, say, hey, it's a huge audience we're targeting. We could slice and dice them in lots of ways. One is by frequency of usage, so power users versus novice users. One could be based on what life cycle they're at. Are they like first time users versus have they ever used the platform before? A third could be by age group. A fourth could be by what they're there for, what type of content they consume. There's loads of options. I'm going to go with power users versus novice users simply because then I choose power users and they'd allow me to target a really, really big segment of users where we see most bang for the buck. and explaining it. So it's just about constructing how you phrase your logic here. Gives me a lot more confidence that you've chosen a segment and sorry, not chosen a segment. You've chosen a segmentation mechanism that is going to prove relevant for the rest of the interview.
Got it.
All right. The second nuance you did was sub-segment the power users into professional, non-professional. I thought that was adequately done. I think it's fine to call out the competitors at this stage because it's good to take into account what competitors exist, and if they are specialized in a domain, then it's perfectly okay to say, hey, then that stuff we should stay clear of because it will add an extra level of difficulty in getting users to even try out our stuff. Like there's LinkedIn, there's other nuanced channels meant for professionals. So let's steer clear of those. We're going to choose those who are power users of non-professional. And at this stage, now that you've chosen a segment, I thought that was a great opportunity here to flesh out the persona a little bit. So when talking about their problems, you did give some certain angles, but I think here is an opportunity to maybe tell a story that it's millennials. These are people who are relatively young, often really busy cosmopolitan lifestyles. They've got a truckload of things going on, be it school or playing games with friends and so on and so forth. So there's limited time they have. They want to get most bang for their buck when they traverse social media. They want to instantly see what their trends are up to, but they also want to keep up with the latest trends. And I think fleshing out that persona then makes it really easy for your expert to buy into the problem statements that you then outline as well. Otherwise, it's very easy for me to say, hey, like, do millennials really have a problem with too much content? Like, millennials are on TikTok browsing like 1,000 videos a day, or they're on Snapchat constantly exchanging information. They should be the best people equipped to handle too much content. But at the same time, if you then articulate that, hey, there's this 10 different sources always throwing information at you, some showing a bomb blast, others showing cat videos, all competing for your attention, can lead to an incredibly stressful experience that you don't even realize and that you're too young to be aware of. That certainly fleshes out the severity of the information overload, of the mental health problems, of all the things that you were trying to demonstrate over here. So this is the second piece of constructive, which is that like when it comes to fleshing out the persona, there's an opportunity to tell a story, and I'd say grab it. All right. The third piece here was that this is the stage where you also drop the two-sided perspective. I'd suggest, given that you flagged that earlier, it's best to do that explicitly rather than implicitly. Otherwise, your interviewer might get left with, okay, she forgot about that. What happened to the creators in this entire ecosystem? Because very often, not only are creators important and fundamental, it's often the same person who's going to be the creator and consumer. In fact, a significant number of people are going to post a status update and then browse the newsfeed and like 20 videos and then share something. So it's a feedback loop. They will often share stuff that they consume, right? So it's important not to drop that angle of the ecosystem. But I thought you did a good job in flagging out later that you've chosen to deprioritize it. So that was well covered ground. Next, problems. You identified really relevant problems. I really thought you did a good job here already. But you explained the problems. What I tend to see as a very effective tactic is to come up with 1-2 word descriptions for each of them. So A, too much information, B, trust, and 3, the mental effects. And then suddenly your interviewer is left with, okay, these are the 3 buzzwords, the 3 keywords that we're going to be talking about today. It just makes it easier to bring back the topics as well. But overall, I thought you identified problems well. And here I tried to push you down a dangerous path by telling you, okay, like, let's jump into, before this, I had tried to push you down, okay, so for this user segment, how are you going to solve, what are you going to build? And very well, you handle that very well by saying, okay, first I'm going to think about the problems, then I'll think about the solutions. So it was kind of a trap where I asked you to like come up with solutions immediately. I thought that was elegantly handled. All right. So well done. Finally, around prioritization. So at this stage, basically when you talked about which problems you want to focus on, I challenged you to tell me about other things that could inform your prioritization. And you talked about reach, and you talked about how the majority of these power users are millennials, where these issues are particularly strong. I didn't entirely get how these were different to the original argument you had around impact in general, but I also let it go because I could see that you'd already signposted that you're going to talk about why you'll be prioritizing certain solutions. So I would have seen your matrix at that stage. Some interviewers might choose to go down this rabbit hole of why is this the biggest problem to solve for at all, because they might have chosen at this stage a different problem. So just be a little more, like, be prepared to defend why a certain problem is going to be the big one, especially given that this is such a tenuous problem, which is going to be so hard to measure the impact of. All right. Finally, when it came to the articulation of an MVP goal, I thought that was a nice way to summarize the current state of the discussion and also come up with a one-liner that again made it memorable. So good job on that. I thought you had decent solutions. I don't think any of them were like, whoa, this is going to revamp the entire world kinds. But that's much less also a criteria these days. Having said that, I do want to caution you that some interviewers explicitly do look for that. So they might challenge you to think of something even more game changing. It's worth being prepared for that if you can. I personally don't think it's realistic to always expect that in every interview, but there are the occasional like interviewers who will be like, okay, think bigger. Or let's say you have to design a newsfeed 2.0 that's going to double our revenues with the same number of ads, or that's going to double our engagement or something crazy like that. These solutions you have right now might not fit into exactly that, and that might be what they're trying to scope the interview in the direction of. So it's worth thinking about those as well. Having said that, I thought you had decent solutions and you prioritized and you justified that priority well. It was a good flag at this stage, flagging out the impact effort matrix. So well done. I also thought you articulated the solution pretty well. This is the point at which I wanted you to express what the end state could be like for the team and what some of the risks and mitigations would be. We went through this relatively rapidly. For a lot of interviews, this would become the bulk of the interview, particularly again for a topic you'd pick being a very hard one to measure. In fact, I'm nearly sure that if the interview had a little more time, they would go a lot deeper into, okay, mental health. How are you actually going to detect it? Because this is a very real world problem that they're trying to solve. So they would have gone much deeper into, okay, beyond surveys, what data points could you look at? How would you interpret them? What could be some of the dangers of interpreting them in certain directions? So I think you would have done that decently given the path you were on, but just something to think about later so that you're like wholly prepared for this topic.
Got it.
Overall, so there was one nuance here which I wanted to explicitly call out. So I asked you, okay, what happens if, say, overall engagement goes down because they're consuming less content, right? There's also a bit of a trap question, and it's something that comes up frequently. And there's two ways to deal with it. One is the way you dealt with it, which is a pretty solid way, which is to say, okay, I'm going to give control back to the users, or I'm going to dig deeper into understanding if something went wrong. The other way, and this is rarer, but in this case, it could have been equally strong, is to say that I'm okay with that. That's a trade-off that I will make as a PM, because the quality of engagement we might be getting in this, say, half the time they're spending might be way higher and might have much stronger retention benefits or loyalty benefits, which will ensure long-term engagement. So I might define a threshold which I consider acceptable and say that, hey, if people are reducing their time spent on the site by 20%, I'm totally okay with it if it means that I might be achieving a general good and increase their loyalty to the platform. So that again, it shows that you're used to making trade-offs like this, because again, in the real world, you will often end up launching something that might show a negative impact on some metrics. And then it's up to you to defend it as being adequate. All right.
Yeah.
So that is, in a very large nutshell, my take on the interview. Like overall, I can tell you on the back of this, I would have given a leaning towards higher recommendation. So good job on that front. My constructive is meant to be treated as such. So you will definitely not be expected to say everything the way I said it. I was just giving you a perspective to take into account. But ultimately, like, I thought you did a decent job.
Thank you very much. It was super helpful and very constructive.
Thank you. I'm glad you found it useful. We'll wrap up for today. Bye-bye and best of luck.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, please subscribe. Our website is prepfully.com. We've got lots of interview questions there. You can also schedule a mock interview with one of our experts. You can find the link in the description below. All the best from us at Prep Fully, and we hope you totally rock your interview.